Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Wendy Jones. I'm a biologist with the Portland District Office, and we are here today for the master plan meeting for Fall Creek, Dexter, Lookout Point, and Hills Creek Lakes. So these instructions are only if you don't have a working microphone on your computer. Usually if you're using a phone, the microphone should be fine. We will be having a question and answer period at the end of this meeting, and so these are the instructions if for some reason your microphone's not working. For the duration of the presentation, everyone will be muted, and then we will make a change in the meeting settings so that everyone will be able to come off of mute for questions and answers. So this slide is for those of you that might be new to the Teams platform. I want to cover some of the features in here so you know how to unmute and to use the various buttons. Please keep in mind that these icons may be on the top or bottom of your screen or even a panel on the right-hand side. It really depends on if you're on a phone app or you may be on a computer browser or a computer app. So take a minute to look around for these buttons. The microphone button is going to be or a speaker button will be your mute and unmute. Cameras currently are disabled as well. The chat button is the little bubble. That will open up a side panel. We will have the chat feature open throughout the meeting. So if you're having technical difficulties or you have questions about the presentations or comments about these lakes, you can enter it into the chat. In the green text there's also a raise hand button. We'll use that in just a little bit, and also at the end, if you would like to ask a question instead of putting it in the chat, that will give you a way to raise your hand. You'll have a number assigned, so you'll be in a queue so we can call on people. And then down at the bottom of the screen, if you need a little bit extra help with closed captioning, there is a little button. It is 3 dots, and then it has the word more underneath it. You can turn on closed captioning on your device if you click on that More button and go down to Language and Speech, and then you should see an option to show live captions, and that will show the transcription at the bottom of your screen as we're doing the presentation. All right, before we get started on the presentation slides, I just want to go over some conversation etiquette. When we get to the point of question and answers, we are going to ask people to take turns, to listen to one another and be respectful. We're happy to answer questions, and we know that you care about these lakes. That's why you're here today. So just take a moment to ask any questions that you may want to, and wait for others to have their turn to ask. All right, so thank you for calling in today. We do have, for the meeting, we are going to have a couple of different presenters. We will cover some introductions and then a short overview of the Willamette Valley Project. We will talk about the resources at these 4 lakes, and then we will talk about the master plan revision process itself and how you can be involved. So for the Army Corps of Engineers, we have several members of the team that are on the call today. We're representing 3 different offices coming together to work on this master plan revision. And then specific to the lakes in the Middle Fork Willamette Basin, we've got the Oregon Parks and Recreation that manage a number of the recreation areas at Fall Creek and Dexter. And then the U.S. Forest Service is another key partner that manages recreation sites at the upper half of Lookout Point and at Hills Creek. So I'd like to start today by learning a little bit about who is on the call with us today. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here, and then you'll be able to use that raise hand feature or the chat feature. So you can take a moment to locate that on your screen. And my first question is, if you show raise a hand, who boats or fishes on these lakes? Great, I'm seeing a number of hands come up. And if you want to use the chat feature, feel free to add in the type of boating or fishing, or if it's at one lake or multiple lakes. Right, great. And you see how it's assigning numbers. So when you ask questions later, that will do the same thing. And then if you have your hand raised, if you click that hand raise button again, it'll lower your hand. All right. And then my next question, so we can try this again. Who has camped at one of these lakes or hiked or walked on one of the trails? Great. I'm seeing some more hands. Wonderful. All right. If you have a favorite location, you're more than welcome to add that into the chat. All right, you can lower your hands. Now, just as a reminder, that chat will be open throughout the presentation. So if you have comments or questions, you can continue to answer or enter those into the chat. And when we get to the question and answer portion, Michelle will start going through those and asking for answers on a number of those. All right, so why are we here today? So prior to revising the master plan for these 4 lakes, the Corps is interested in receiving feedback from the public on their experiences in these places. We really value the public engagement, and these scoping meetings help identify data gaps that we may have, provide additional information that we hadn't considered, and it allows us a space to share ideas and receive honest feedback on your concerns and your priorities on how these places are managed. We can build from today for long-term collaboration, and we want to make sure that we welcome in everyone that wants to participate. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dustin Bankston, and he's going to give us a Willamette Valley Project overview.
Thanks, Wendy, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to help us with this process and to kind of kickstart things. I am the operations project manager for the 13 dams in the Willamette and then 2 dams in Southern Oregon, the Rogue Basin Project. And I have been here for about 33 years in one capacity or another. And in that time, I have seen a lot of change in our system, in public expectations, in legal requirements. And so those dams that we constructed beginning in the late 30s, early 40s, and finally completed the last dam at Blue River in 1969, that system has been operating in a fairly dynamic state for most of that time. But certainly in the last several years, we have seen a number of changes to the system, demands on it, increases in legal requirements and ways that we operate in compliance with those requirements, and new construction to try to improve on what we're doing or to mitigate impacts associated with the dams that we manage. These dams operated as a system across the Willamette require us to look comprehensively at how we manage public risk and flow management, but also how we provide for other authorized purposes. And those multiple purposes, I think most folks know and have probably heard myself or Eric Peterson talk about this. Our primary purpose is flood risk management. That's the driver. And so anything that we do in terms of changes to operations or how we manage resources that we have, how we manage water that we store, cannot come at the expense of that risk downstream. And so there is a pretty hard sidewall that we measure everything against. But inside of that, there's opportunity based on a balance of legal requirements and resources we have available and the infrastructure that we have in place to try to maximize these benefits around other authorities we have. Authorities around production of hydropower, and we produce hydropower at 8 facilities in the Willamette. We have a navigation authority on the books, and although commercial navigation did not materialize on the Willamette in the way that it was originally envisioned, we do use some of that capacity for flow augmentation to improve water quality and conditions for fish and wildlife downstream. We also have authorities for water supply and irrigation. So as population grows, as demands on the system change and increase, there is the capacity to use that water for those benefits. And certainly there's an aspect and plans envisioning that use for the future. And then I think many of the folks that are on here just looking at the chat and would expect this, a number of us use these reservoirs for public recreation, and the communities near them are very dependent on public recreation use and the economy associated with that for their stability in their communities. So there's a lot to balance, and those authorized purposes are increasingly in tension. And so we're evaluating a number of things, and I'll talk about those in a second, but really what we're trying to do in our day-to-day processes is find that sustainable balance between those needs or those authorities that we can operate for. And this plan, a master plan, is a land use plan. So how do we achieve objectives with the lands that we manage around our reservoirs in ways that provide balanced benefits and resource protection and are aligned with, to the extent that we can, adjacent public and private land uses for the future. And so it's timely for us to come back to this. A number of the master plans in the Willamette Basin are very old and dated. We've achieved a number of objectives in those plans over time, and there are things that we have not realized, and it's time to revisit them. So it's an exciting thing to be able to think into the future, 30 or more years beyond today, on how we will operate, maintain, protect resources in this basin for the next group of folks that'll be using it. Next slide, Wendy. To clarify, I guess, or distinguish between what we're trying to do in the master plan process and a lot of other things that have been very visible and taken a lot of resources and time, I did want to talk about other things that are going on in the Willamette Valley. Many of you probably know we have been working since 2019 on a revision of our Willamette Valley System Operations and Maintenance, EIS. We finalized that EIS in April of 2025. And as a function of defining how we're going to operate the system, we received a biological opinion for the continued operations and maintenance of the Willamette system. And we have legal requirements around federally listed species, and most of you are familiar with those. Some of them anyway, salmon and steelhead being very visible and have been the driver for a lot of operational and structural changes we've made in the system over the last 20 or more years. But also we manage a number of terrestrial species that are listed. And so in trying to manage those responsibilities for the continued operation of the system for the benefits that I mentioned on the previous slide, we're working through that process not only of defining how we operate, but how we complete specific actions to avoid jeopardy to those species. In addition to that EIS that I mentioned earlier, for the last year or so, we've been working at a supplemental EIS that's in development and scheduled for a release in probably spring of 2026, requiring us to look at two things. One is the ceasing hydropower operations at our 8 facilities in the Willamette and what that would entail. Is there a federal interest in that, and how would we manage those impacts? That was a requirement of language in the Water Resources Development Act of 2024. So we've been working on evaluating and articulating what the impact to ceasing hydropower operations would be. And in addition to that, an aspect of the biological opinion, which involves an operational fish passage drawdown at Detroit Reservoir, something that folks in the Middle Fork are very familiar with because we've been doing it at Lookout Point for the last couple of years. We're evaluating that operation as well. And once that's complete, the intent would be to finalize our EIS and then work toward compliance with the biological opinion. That is not what we're doing in the master plan. It's not tied to the master plan decisions we make, but it is certainly something we will consider in the context of how we manage or how we set broader objectives as we work through this process. Something else I would draw people's attention to, and I think everybody should be familiar because many of us live downstream of these dams, is a tool called the National Inventory of Dams. That is a nationwide effort to help really make more visible or accessible information on flood inundation risks and the condition of our facilities to people that plan for emergencies, live downstream. It is very accessible to you. You can simply go into the National Inventory of Dams, Google it, and you can find the state of Oregon and dams in the area that you live in. And there's a wealth of information there that can help you make personal decisions on how you would manage risk or in the case of an emergency respond. But it's also a very good tool for county and state level folks to plan for those emergencies and how they support people. So that's another tool. And then many of you have probably heard over the years, we have a very robust dam safety program. And part of that is this ongoing assessment of our facilities' condition and risks to those in a variety of events, I guess, most visible or prominent is the seismic risk that we all have here in the Northwest. And so as we understand more about seismic vulnerabilities, we continue to assess our facilities, and where we see a potential issue or an issue that requires further study, in many of our reservoirs, we've established interim risk reduction measures. Until we get through a much more detailed process of defining what we would do and then be able to implement that, we'll live with those interim risk reduction measures. And some of them are around communication and coordination with local agencies, and some of them are more visible to you, like pool restrictions. And we have a pool restriction both at Lookout Point and a pool restriction at Hills Creek that will be increasing as we continue to kind of evaluate what those alternatives are. On the whole, it's about making sure that our systems are safe and we're managing risks within tolerable risk guidelines. But those are going to be processes that have public involvement or public notification. Again, not tied to the master plan, but easily confused because we have a lot of these things overlapping in the Willamette right now. Next slide, Wendy. So as we look at master plan revisions, back originally when the dams were constructed, many of these plans, master planning requirements, were developed later. But at that time, there was an individual master plan tied to each individual project. And so as we looked comprehensively at how will we go through these revisions, for the most part, we make decisions and people use or benefit from how we make those decisions in watersheds or in some of these groupings that we've established on the screen. And so we made the decision to consolidate some of these plans. It's much more efficient from a cost standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint over time, but it also makes sense given how people tend to use or are interacting with the resources that we manage. The Coast Fork master plan, which incorporated Cottage Grove and Dorena Lakes, and the South Santiam, which is Foster and Green Peter, both of those master plans were completed this year. And so we're currently working through two somewhat concurrently. The Long Tom master plan, which is Fern Ridge Lake, and then the grouping that we're here to talk about today, which includes Fall Creek, Dexter, Lookout Point, and Hills Creek in the Middle Fork. And so we will look at land use classifications, at opportunities, public expectations, and resources that we manage in that way for this master plan. And this is kind of the largest grouping of projects that we have. So be an interesting process for us to all work through as we kind of set that tone for the future. And then subsequent to available funding, we will have similar efforts in the McKinsey and the North Santiam for projects there. So with that, what I'm going to do next is turn it back to Wendy so she can talk about what really is a master plan and what are we trying to achieve.
Thank you for that, Dustin. So master plans are future planning documents. They are supposed to guide the next 25 years or so, and they really talk about what we have for our current recreation opportunities, as well as any plans for future recreation. And then we also discuss the natural resources, the fish and wildlife, the habitat, and cultural resources. And they really are supposed to establish a vision for future management. And I want to clarify here, the way the word project is often used by the Army Corps may sound like jargon. When we say project, it means the dam, the reservoir, all of the land surrounding that that's federally managed. And it comes from when the dam construction project was authorized.
Hey, Wendy, you just went on mute.
We lost audio. Sorry, folks, our baseball signals are a little bit off here. We've been having difficulty with the phone dropping audio. So we'll dial back in just a second.
Is that phone turned off completely?
There you are, Wendy. Got you back.
To go through your computer.
Can you guys hear me now?
Can hear you, Christy.
Oh, wait, I have to do that.
I mean, the phone's not completely out.
Can you hear us, Christy?
I don't know.
My only concern is it drops again. We're right back
Yeah.
to the same hole.
I know it's muted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, we lost the audio on the conference line, so we're gonna go through our computer now.
All right, thank you for that. Dustin, do you want me to go back to the last slide or just start with this one?
Yeah, I think you can start with this one. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you everyone for your patience. All right, so master plans are going to be future planning documents, and they're really going to go into a lot of the recreation at the lake as well as the resources. So anything from vegetation, wetlands, all of the fish and wildlife resources that are there, both common species and rare species. And we really are interested today in hearing about these types of topics. We will also be integrating a NEPA document into our master plan. So a NEPA is a federal regulation that requires us to analyze the consequences of our action. And so we'll be looking at how any of these proposed land management changes might affect the resources that are protected by various federal laws or executive orders. So the previous master plans for these lakes, for Lookout Point, Dexter, and Fall Creek, those were completed in between 1987 and 1994. However, the Hills Creek master plan, the original one is from 1963 and has only had minor updates since then. What you can see here on the screen, it's a recent aerial image, but it has the previous land classification shown on the screen. A lot of what we do in a master plan is like a zoning document, a zoning plan. And so what you can see here, we have operational areas. These maps are Fall Creek and Dexter. The yellow areas are for operations. Recreational areas can be the orange and brown colors. There's high density and low density recreation. The more natural areas can be vegetation and wildlife. Those are shown in green. And any single unit can have multiple uses, but we have to pick one primary use for each area. And then the surface water is also zoned for boating use, and most of it remains as open recreation, but we can also have areas that are no wake zones, restricted areas, or fish and wildlife sanctuary. So as we update these master plans, we will be changing some of these classifications to reflect the current conditions on the ground. So there are a number of things that you don't include in a master plan because there are typically other planning documents the Army Corps writes that do cover those operations. As Dustin mentioned earlier, that environmental impact statement covers quite a bit of the dam operations. There's also a shoreline management plan that covers those programs at the two lakes we have in the Willamette Valley at Dexter and Fern Ridge. And so while the master plans don't direct the dam operations, they do need to respond and react to those changes. So for example, with these deep drawdowns to pass juvenile fish downstreams, we know that that can impact recreational opportunities for boat ramp availability or campgrounds or fishing and so on. So in the master plan, we could describe how we might work with partners such as the Forest Service or Oregon State Parks or others to really emphasize additional forms of recreation that aren't as water dependent, such as hiking, biking, or horse trails. So why are we updating them now? They do need to be updated periodically so they remain relevant. Many of the plans in the valley are over 40 years old now. And there's a number of changes that occur in land use, both on the Army Corps land as well as the surrounding areas. There's environmental conditions that change, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Regulatory changes can include new federal species listings or other federal mandates. And then nationwide, we see changes in how people recreate with larger RVs. There are larger boats that are out on the water, and then also the popularity of paddle sports have greatly increased. So when it comes to the environmental conditions, quite a bit has changed since the last master plan updates. We are seeing more frequent droughts, which also leads to an increased risk in wildfire. There has not been consistent vegetation management in some of the areas throughout the valley. And we're also seeing changes with the snow and rain events, sometimes more severe precipitation events or shifting later into the season. When it comes to cultural resource stewardships, we have a better understanding of our trust responsibilities and have increased our partnerships working with the tribes on some of the management objectives in our units. And then, of course, there's all the changes that have come with fish recovery, with the fish passage requirements, and then updates to our fish facilities as well. So the master planning process has a few different phases. What we're doing today is just the start of that revision process. So we're in a scoping phase for you to provide information on what you like, what you don't like, what future conditions might be possible at these lakes. And we really encourage you to participate and to talk with others about this to get more people at the table so we can hear about all the interests at these lakes. In about a year, we should have a document that we can provide back to you for edits and comments. So that will be that second phase, the draft phase. What we will do is take all the information that you provide now during this scoping phase. We'll look at our old documents, we'll collect a lot of new data and other source document, and we will write a draft plan. We will again notify everyone when we do meetings to release that draft plan to the public. And then as we enter that third phase, we will take all of your comments on the document and revise the draft into a final. And then it will be finalized once we get formal approval by the district commander. So I really encourage you to participate today to give us as much of your ideas and thoughts so that we can make a great draft document. I'm going to turn it over to Christy Johnson, and she's going to describe the resources at the Four Lakes.
Hello, my name is Christy Johnson. I'm the lead natural resource specialist for the Willamette Valley Project. I'm going to now provide some background on the existing resources at Fall Creek, Dexter, Lookout Point, and Hills Creek Lakes. And I'm going to start by talking about the recreation resources and how they're managed at each of the lakes currently. And then I'll talk about the environmental resources and the cultural resources. As I talk about the existing resources and how they're managed, think about how you'd like to see these resources managed in the future so you can provide us feedback on that. So we'll start with Fall Creek Lake. This map shows the recreation and the developed recreation areas at Fall Creek Lake. Fall Creek is one of the most popular lakes for recreation, including boating, fishing, swimming, picnicking, and camping. The Oregon Parks and Recreation Department manages most of the recreation areas, including the North Shore Boat Ramp, Winberry Park and Boat Ramp, the Cascara Campground, the Fisherman's Group Campground, and 3 small day use areas on the north side of the lake. The Springfield School District manages Sky Camp, which is an outdoor school facility. You can see it there sort of in the south end of the upper arm of the lake. The only designated recreation area that the Corps manages is Tufti Park, which is below the dam on the north side. Moving on to Dexter Lake. Dexter Lake is a unique reservoir in the Middle Fork watershed because it stays full year-round. It's also a premier destination for competitive rowing, and I can see there's a lot of people representing the rowing community on the call today. So thanks for coming. All the parks at Dexter Lake are day use only, and so visitors to the Dexter Lake generally enjoy boating, swimming, fishing, and picnicking. Again, the Oregon Parks and Recreation District manages Dexter Park, which has a boat ramp and disc golf course. And they also manage Lowell Park, which has a boat ramp, a marina, and a swim area. The parks that the Corps manages are Orchard Park, which is on the northeast end of the lake. And we also manage a boat launch and fishing area below the dam. I'd also like to mention that there are private docks that are along the lake shoreline, and those docks are managed under the Shoreline Management Program, which will be only very lightly addressed in the master plan because there's a whole nother document for managing shoreline docks. Lookout Point Lake is less busy than the other lakes, which makes it ideal for boating, fishing, hiking, camping, and bird watching. Also, the Eugene to Pacific Crest Trail travels along the north side of the reservoir, connecting the Corps land with the Forest Service land. The Corps manages the Meridian Park boat ramp, the Signal Point boat ramp, and the Ivan Oaks campground on the northwest side of the lake. And the Forest Service manages the Hardesty Trailhead, the Hampton Boat Launch, the Black Canyon Campground on the southeast side of the lake. So the Willamette National Forest boundary sort of goes down the middle of the lake. And so everything to the southeast end is all the shoreline and all the recreation is managed by the Forest Service. And lastly, Hills Creek Lake. It's known for its scenic boating and wildlife viewing along its 44 miles of forested shoreline. The Corps only manages the viewpoints on the north and south ends of the dam and the wetland area below the dam. All the other shoreline areas are managed by the Forest Service. There's dispersed recreation all along the lake shoreline, and then there's 3 developed boat ramps, 2 campgrounds, and several day use areas managed by the Forest Service. So that's an overview of recreation resources. So for environmental stewardship, our mission is to protect and enhance the environment. And the forested shoreline of the Middle Fork reservoirs provide unique habitats for a great variety of plants and animals. There's critical habitat for threatened species such as the northern spotted owl and bull trout. And the main stem and tributaries of the Middle Fork Willamette River also provide critical habitat for the spawning, rearing, and migration of spring Chinook salmon and winter steelhead, which are really important to the region's conservation efforts for those species. In addition to managing native species, we use land management strategies that emphasize the prevention, containment, and eradication of invasive species, as well as early detection and treatment of any new invaders. Cultural resource stewardship is an equal and integral part of all resource management at Corps reservoirs. Now, for the purposes of the master plan, the term cultural resources is a broad term that typically includes historic and pre-contact archaeological sites and artifacts. It also includes burials and cemeteries and significant built structures such as bridges and even the dams. And it also includes places and resources that are significant to tribes. The Corps surveys and monitors these resources with a small team of archaeologists and academic partners. And also the park rangers and law enforcement partners assist in protecting those cultural resources by educating people not to collect any resources from Corps land and enforcing those rules if necessary. I'm going to pass this back to Wendy.
All right, thank you very much, Christy, and thank you all for calling in and for listening. Now we're going to switch things around to hear from you. So we have several ways we'd like to invite you to participate in this master plan revision process. You can visit our website for information. The QR code that's on the screen here will link you to that page, and Michelle is also posting some information into the chat, so you can click on the link directly. A recording of this presentation will be posted shortly, so please share with others that could not attend today, or if you want to go back and review some of the things that we covered, that recording will be online on the same website. Any comments that you have could be submitted through either through email or through regular mail. And if you'd like to join us in person to discuss this more, we will be hosting a meeting at Lowell High School this Saturday at 2 p.m. We will be giving the same presentation, but we'll have some maps in the room and a number of Army Corps staff for you to discuss topics with, and some comment cards in the room there. We do ask that all comments be submitted by February 23rd for this scoping phase. And then in addition, in late 2026, the draft master plan document and environmental assessment will be available for public review and for comment. So we will again make notifications and hold another round of public meetings to share those documents. Can you go to the next slide? Or is it the last one? All right, thank you. So we greatly appreciate your time to attend the public meeting today. Your participation is very helpful to our revision process. I'm going to keep this slide up that has a little bit of the information on how to contact us with the email and with the website. I'm going to change the settings so that everyone can come off of mute one at a time. And that way you can ask questions. And Michelle will start with those questions that are already in the chat, if there's any there. And then if anyone wants to ask a question, they can raise their hand and we'll go through and let people, you don't have to type it in the chat if you prefer to ask it out loud. I know there's at least one person that called in phone only. So when we get through some of these first questions, we'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number, make sure you can unmute and see if you have any questions as well. So Michelle, are there any questions in the chat yet? Yeah, and if you don't have specific comments about the specific questions about the presentation, you can also write in a comment if there's something specific you're concerned about or something you want us to keep in mind for the master plan revision. We're especially interested if you have any documents that could be helpful to us. So if there are other regional or local planning documents, things related to biking, hiking, transportation networks, anything that we should be considering as we're working on our plan revision.
Okay, so we got first question is, I'm unclear on what types of information or input from us would be most valuable for your process.
Sure, I can start with that one. So if you know there are certain wildlife populations or habitat types or special natural areas that need additional protection or some type of extra management, we'd like to hear about those. It can be a unique area. It could be native vegetation or a natural area that just needs a little attention. If there are recreational concerns that you have with the current status of the infrastructure that is in place, if there are safety concerns, there's overcrowding on boat ramps, that's helpful information. If you are out on the lakes and you're noticing a conflict between types of boat use, whether that's motorboats compared to stand-up paddleboards and canoes and kayaks, swim areas. Part of what we do is set water regulations with the State Marine Board. So that type of information is very helpful. If there's a type of recreation that's not currently allowed that you would like to see, that's a very helpful comment. We want to know what's not working well, but we also want to know what you like and enjoy and want to continue to see. Christy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, specifically, I see, Renee, that you're from the, rowing community. If you guys have facilities that you think need to be added to improve, opportunities for rowing or safety for rowing, that would be the kind of feedback that we might want to get as well.
And Dustin, did you have as well?
Yeah, to add to what you said, Wendy, I think it's also very helpful for us to get through this process, a better understanding of future development plans on adjacent lands. What do our neighbors intend? And so as we look at land use classifications and future management objectives, better understanding of what's going on around the project can help us make more informed decisions about future goals. So there's that piece that is specific to our lands, but I think in terms of comments and information that will help the scoping process, people's familiarity with longer range plans and how our lands may tie to those will help us make better decisions.
you for that, Dustin. And I should have mentioned earlier, these are public meetings. Anyone can attend them, as well as people from organizations or agencies. We will definitely be working closely with the state parks and the Forest Service, as well as the city of Lowell and some of the other, the city of Oak Ridge and some of the other key stakeholders that are in those areas. So if you don't know if your comment is valuable, rest assured it is. We do want to hear from as many people as possible. Don't worry if someone else is submitting the same comment. Whatever concerns or issues or ideas you have about these 4 lakes, please submit your comments.
All right, we also had a comment or a question here. I heard the shoreline management is a separate document. Does this revision include any issues on the shore?
Yeah, so I can take that question. So just to be clear, the shoreline management program is specifically for people who live along the shoreline. They have private land adjacent to the core land, and it gives them the opportunity to get a permit, not at all the lakes, only specifically at Dexter Lake and at Fern Ridge Lake. And there's lakes across the nation that the Corps manages where people have private land adjacent to the Corps land. And so they have an opportunity to get a permit to have a private dock or to be able to cut a trail from their land through Corps land to the lake. And so that's what that is. So the plan does cover the shoreline, and the way that the shoreline is used, it's just the shoreline management is specific for private facilities. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you have any suggestions on how the shoreline can be managed around any of the 4 lakes we're talking about here, we do want that input.
Okay, next question here. You mentioned that the plan is mostly a land use plan. What about on water uses?
Sure, I'll start with that one. So it is a land use plan in that those land use classifications for operations, recreation, multiple resource management uses can only be applied to the lands above that full lake pool there, the maximum conservation pool. When it comes to facilities that extend into the lake bed, we will describe all of those in the unit. So if there is a swim beach and we're concerned about blue-green algae or water quality issues, and we might want to manipulate something there to improve the swimming, we could include that in the plan. If we have ideas to improve or extend boat ramps to make sure lakes have a low water ramp as well as the high water ramps, those can all be discussed in there. But when it comes to the actual zoning on the classification type for the water, we will do either open recreation for boating purposes, restricted areas, that's typically for safety or security purposes around the dam intakes. And then also no wake zones, which you often find with the State Marine Board regulations around boat ramps and swim beaches. We do have a few fish and wildlife sanctuary areas in our old master plans at these lakes where no motors are allowed, either because it can be a lot of submerged stumps and a safety hazard, or we know there's northwestern pond turtles or other concerns in those areas. So we definitely want to hear ideas for both in the water and on the land.
All right, we have the comment, please preserve and enhance rowing at Dexter. Thank you. And also another comment, as a rower and kayaker, mostly on Dexter, I am concerned about motorized boats on the lake, sometimes not seeing us. And there have been instances in the past.
So that is a very helpful comment. I think that's a good example of letting us know when there's a problem. If you have specific information about if that is happening during events or when you're out there on your own, or if you have ideas for us on the most commonly used areas for paddle sports versus motorboats, that helps us work with State Marine Board to set different designations. And any type of information like that can be very helpful to us.
Okay, I'm gonna jump down. There's just a comment I think on that we just did. Says, I echo this point. There are considerable safety concerns between large, high-powered motor boats and recreation paddle sports. Dexter Lake is a huge asset for the sport of rowing, not just in Eugene, but across the Northwest and West Coast, with significant opportunities to grow and support national teams and other water sports with LA 2028 on the horizon. That would be the Olympics. Race course and facilities are a big part of that, and happy to submit feedback.
Great, thank you.
And then going back up, I have a question here. Will better access points for paddle sports be considered, i.e. not having to use motorized boat ramps?
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion. We actually had that suggestion on one of our other master plans for Foster Lake. And so something to consider would maybe be creating a designated launching area for paddle sports. And since the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department manages the many of the parks at Fall Creek and Dexter, that would be a suggestion that we could provide them and they may be able to incorporate into their plans. And if it's something that they are interested in, we can incorporate it into our plans. So that's a very good suggestion.
And the State Marine Board has been a great partner across the Willamette Valley with a number of land managers with great designs and funding and all sorts of technical support for multiple types of ramps. And so that's a state agency that we'll definitely work closely with as we revise this master plan.
Right, we have a comment. I have heard that it may be possible to leave the race course in for a longer period of time. It has been calculated that approximately 5.2 to 5.2% of the entire lake acreage is used for the course. This is a percentage of the entire lake, upper and lower. This is very important. I would love to see this. We have a real gem here. There is a very large area available for other activities.
Okay, comment noted. Thank you.
We have a question. Do you want input on public docs?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. If there's something that can be improved about them, again, if it's not a resource the Corps manages, it would be something that we would work with our partners on, but it would be good to hear what you think about them.
And I think it's important for these comments, again, if you're not sure if it's relevant or not, go ahead and submit it. A lot of times this master planning process is a way to connect with new people or reinvigorate partnerships that maybe have slowed over the past few years. And so submit your comments. If it's not necessarily something that we include in detail in the master plan, it could be something that you work with the local staff on a long-term collaboration about.
All right, we've got some more comments here. The Pac-12 has a regatta here a couple years ago. It was amazing to watch. These regattas bring hundreds of people into the area. There is a drone coverage for the regatta. This is beautiful evidence of what the lake offers and how it is appreciated. Thank you for your attention on this.
Thank you.
Another comment, another rower. I also support having the race course up for longer and other support for local and regional rowing.
Great.
And then we have a question. Has there been any consideration of limitations on water displacement of the lake? Displacement of the wake surfing boats due to very large wake they produce?
I don't know if there's been any consideration for it, but it's definitely something that you can, put out there and propose as a comment. That would probably be something the Oregon State Marine Board would be involved in because they regulate the surface water and the activities on it.
Yeah, and we'll work closely with them. I know at some Army Corps lakes, the no wake zones can also include areas near the private shoreline management program docks. Historically, in the Willamette Valley, most of the no wake zones were at the public boat launches and public marinas, but that's something we could consider with this revision.
There was a comment in here, same here to a previous comment, the resource nature of Dexter as a rowing regatta venue. Having the race course up for longer stretches really supports us. Another comment there. And then this question, can a boom be used to limit hazardous logs on Dexter?
Dustin, is that
Good
one maybe
question.
that you could answer?
Yeah, so I mean, we manage woody debris in our system primarily for the purposes of being able to keep it off of the intake structures. So that idea of debris management on the reservoir, how we do it, I think would be a good comment. How that would get done or who would do it would be a subject of discussion, could be a subject of discussion in the master plan in terms of laying out objectives. I know that our modified operations, our spring spill operations for fish passage are moving more debris through the system. And so that is a future consideration for a lot of those uses because that's likely to be an operational fish passage feature for us for some time. So understand what your comment is related to. And again, I think that idea of how we manage the lake surface for both use and safety is something that this process is good to start to daylight some of those alternatives.
Another question, what opportunities are there to involve Army Corps in getting running water down to the rowing facilities at Dexter Lake?
I think that could be a possibility. It would have to, I believe that the rowing facilities are a sublease of the Oregon Parks and Recreation District's lease. So they have a lease agreement with the Corps of Engineers. And so our involvement, the Corps of Engineers' involvement would be to review whatever proposals were made and then assist as possible to help the permitting process. All right.
Yep.
All right, so we have the comment, within the last year, very large bright lights have been installed at the Lowell Marina. These lights burn all night and are very intrusive to the night ambiance of the lake and likely wildlife habitat. Lowell is a dark sky community and these lights are definitely detrimental to that endeavor. These lights should be changed to adhere to dark sky requirements. We love our sunsets and stars.
Thank you for that comment. And we have talked with some folks with the Eugene Astronomical Society group as well. They do some outreach and educational events at Dexter State Recreation Area and try to limit the lights for those nights when they do those events. And that may be something that we can at least touch on in a broad sense in the master plan with a goal or an objective, and then work with the partners that manage some of the areas there to see what can be done about some of the light pollution issues.
All right, we have a question. How do you contact the rowing community to be aware of their activities and events?
And David, are you asking about how your group would contact the rowing community or how the Army Corps contacts the rowing community?
Tell them how to unmute.
There it is. Yeah, I think more importantly, how do we contact, or what notification system does the rowing community provide so that we can place that information in appropriate documentations or notifications to our group?
And just to clarify, for those of you that don't know David, his group does the seaplanes landings on reservoirs. So that's probably why they would want to know, when you're going to have events so they don't disrupt them.
Right. In particular with the rowing community, we're aware of and cognizant of the race course that's put up. And when we overfly and look and see that the race course is there or that there is practicing going on, we avoid that area completely and or avoid the lake completely. So we are aware of that. But what my concern is if the rowing community has a site where they post the event dates and so forth, we can make sure that transiting pilots that aren't local to the situation can be alerted and aware of that particular event or activity on the lake that And it's interesting. The rowing community loves to have lovely, clear, no wake water. Seaplane pilots also like that. And so I giggle a little bit in that the wakeboard boats that are out there are also an annoyance to seaplane activities. So thank you.
So I can connect, David, I can connect you with the folks in the rowing community and try to help figure out how you guys can pass information with each other. So that I'll put that on a do out for myself.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, we have the comment, the rowing community will be focusing on education on the race course and further notification of our activities.
Thank you.
The question, can you improve water quality regarding algae and or sewage outflow or sorry, overflow?
I can start with that one, and then if others want from the Corps want to answer on that. There are some things that there are limited with the master plan revision that we will touch on. There are things that we have discussed with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality or even the Oregon State Marine Board and others when it comes to human safety hazards. If there are sewage overflow issues, that would be the city of Lowell that manages the wastewater treatment plant and those areas. And then they have state regulations that they have to follow. I believe it's the Oregon Health Authority. There's also the Dexter Sanitary District downstream of Dexter Dam that has the same state regulations as well. And so it's definitely a larger partnership in that area. The Corps' oversight tends to be in real estate agreements and managing the use of the federal land. And there can, but typically, Christy, I don't know if you want to say anything about the algae.
So I don't know that there is really anything that we can do about improving the algae situation. It's not something that we have really expertise in. I know that there are scientists at the Oregon State University that are studying it. They take samples from our reservoirs and where there's blooms and they're working on it. But right now we don't really have a solution. Dustin's raising his hand though. Maybe he has something to add.
No, I think appreciate the response, Christy. I think the issue around blue-green algae and the hazards associated with it are something that the state and a number of folks that manage recreation facilities, public lands are dealing with. Most of what we are able to do right now is about informing the public of the risk so that they can take measures. It's a very complicated issue, and I don't think there is a solution to it in the sense that we can figure out ways to eliminate it. I think what we can do, and this could be an aspect of how or objectives that we have within our units, how we inform the public of risk and you know what some of those objectives are. And Christy's right, that's a shared responsibility, something that the state, federal agencies, other entities have been working on for some time.
All right, so we had the comment, thank you for your interest from the Oregon Association of Rowing. Another comment, as Lowell residents, we are exceedingly concerned about the turbidity of the water and when the drawdowns are done. Our small community needs assurance that our water systems are not ruined.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the comment, Jill. I know where it comes from. Again, I feel like a broken record that not something that is specific to our master plan scoping process, but to your point, we are very engaged with the city of Lowell and public drinking water providers, both in terms of how we implement the drawdowns, how we help them understand those operations and how they're managing the impacts to the system. We've certainly seen changes in that over the last couple of years after that initial effort, and that will be ongoing because we will be, in all likelihood, performing these operational fish passage measures for a while. But we're very aware, very engaged. So is your local folks on coordinating with those issues. So appreciate the comment.
So there was a comment about the 3 rowing teams at Dexter Lake, and reaching out to any one of them can get you filled in the upcoming dates with the website address included, which will have updated calendars as well. And there's just a comment that they're also going to need to get the OSU's regatta schedule from David, because there apparently is one that's not listed on that website. So tracking those comments. And then we have this question: have fished Dexter for 40 years and never saw a walleye. Now I'm catching them and wondering why. Since the focus has been on eliminating the ability of predator fish to catch fry, how that is going to be dealt with, and what is an unforeseen effect problem with the drawdowns?
And Greg Taylor should be on. I'm hoping he can address that one.
If
Hey,
not, I can
Pam.
speak to it. Go ahead, Greg.
That's an important comment. So yeah, this is an outcome of the drawdowns. And so the drawdowns are designed to help pass juvenile spring Chinook salmon downstream. But as you're learning, they also pass other fish that are present. And we've had a sizable population of walleye that was illegally introduced at Lookout Point for about 20 years. Very few of those fish went down pre-drawdown. They did. We were getting those fish coming down, but not enough to have a fishable population in Dexter. But post-drawdown, we've seen those numbers go up significantly. And so some of those fish hold up in Dexter, and they're going to take residence there. Some of them are going down into the river below Dexter, and they're taking up residence there. It's a concern. There's not legitimately a thing that can be done about it at this point. We are monitoring it. We're certainly encouraging, and I know ODFW is encouraging anglers, if they catch them, to keep them and eat them. So just an artifact of this drawdown.
Okay, I'm going to ask this next question, then I'm just going to double check right after that about the phone lines. But before we check the phone lines, here's a question: can hazardous stumps be removed?
Yeah, I guess I'd take that. I don't know if Christy's still there. I think we would look at safety as a function of how we manage activities on water. As a practical measure, removal of stump hazards, and we're talking about multiple projects in the basin, it's just not very feasible in terms of overall risk management. Our approach has been to really try to inform people of the hazard, especially as water levels are variable. But it would be a very difficult thing, if you think about the size of Lookout Point, to do something meaningful in terms of reducing risk by removing stumps. There may be isolated cases where we have debris or other things hanging up that can be addressed. I think the overall issue, though, of how we manage boater safety continues to kind of come up in different ways here. That would be a good comment, and especially if there were suggestions as to how we would do that as part of this master planning process in the context of lake zoning and regulation or other objectives we could achieve over time.
Thanks, Dustin. And what we're going to do now, we do have one person that is phone only. The phone number ends in 3136. So if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you may need to hit *6 to unmute. You can ask any questions or submit any comments, or if you just want to say no questions, that's fine as well. And again, for that number ending in 3136, you may need to hit *6 to unmute.
Hi, no questions here. This is just public affairs.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. And then Michelle, are there more questions in the chat?
Yeah, let's continue. We've got another question in the chat. Can you speak about the huge new facility at the hatchery just below Dexter Dam?
Greg, is that one you can answer?
Yep. So we've been upgrading fish facilities in the Willamette for well, quite a while, going back to a biological opinion that was issued back in 2008. And so that's what's happening at Dexter. That facility is being upgraded. The reason there's a whole bunch of new infrastructure is that in the past, adult fish passage wasn't really something that the facility was designed for. The facility was designed to actually keep adult fish on site down there, rear them. But in recent years, we've been trying to reestablish the salmon populations above the dam as a way of improving their status under ESA. And so those new facilities are modifying the ladder, but they're adding some features which help accomplish that, primarily the ability to sort fish, to hold them safely, and then to load them on trucks efficiently. So that upgrade should be done this spring, and the facility hopefully operational this summer.
And one thing to note about those fish facilities and how they interact with the master planning process. So typically any of the facilities would be in an operational area. We do have the larger facility now at Fall Creek and then the one that's currently in development at Dexter. We would be looking at a proposed change to increase the operational area for that site. And then with Hills Creek and Lookout Point, if we don't know today what would be going on in those areas, the process we would go through is we would revise the master plan now. And then in the future, if fish facilities are built in those locations, we would do a supplement to the master plan and make individual adjustments. If it's a small area, we're allowed to do those small changes and get district approval for them. If it's a large revision, though, we need to do this more robust process with all the public engagement and revise the entire document.
We have another comment. We have thank you for this discussion from a rower, hiker, and birdwatcher. Another question here. I was once told that the Willamette did not have a salmon or steelhead population before introduction in the 20th century because of Oregon Falls down by Oregon City. Is that true? From Jove, also an avid rower.
So it's partly true. So the answer is a little bit complicated. So what Willamette Falls was a feature that absolutely shapes the populations of fish that we have in the Willamette Basin. And so we always did have both salmon and steelhead in this area above Willamette Falls in the upper part of the Willamette watershed. And specifically in the Middle Fork watershed, we had spring Chinook salmon. Their migration timing lines up well with kind of the high flows in the late spring that would have allowed them to move up above the falls even without modification. So we had them. What we didn't have is what you see in some of the salmon you see in some of the other parts of our state. So like fall Chinook salmon, coho, were not here historically. And that was because of Willamette Falls and the low flows during the time that those fish come into the river, so that they come into the rivers in the fall. So we had spring Chinook, but not fall and coho, fall Chinook and coho. We have steelhead, winter steelhead that used the system. The Middle Fork did not have a documented population, but our Sanium systems did, which are above the Willamette Falls, and nobody quite understands why that is the case. But yeah, they were present, but just not in the same way that they are in some of our coastal systems.
All right, so a comment to that was makes sense. Thank you from Joe. We have a question. Do you manage the small park and restroom adjacent to the Dexter cover bridge?
Do you want to answer that one?
Oh, yeah, yes, this is Christy. That's a good question. So that bridge is part of Lane County Roads Department, but I believe it's being managed by the city of Lowell.
but it is still within the scope of the master plan for this, even though there's other entities managing those areas. So if you have comments or concerns or questions, we know that area gets a lot of use. It's very visible as you are driving along Highway 58 and as you first, see Dexter Reservoir, Lookout Point Dam, and the city of Lowell. So any comments you have on that area, you could definitely submit.
All right, I don't see any additional comments or questions at this time. If I accidentally missed one, please let us know. Or if there's anyone on the line who would just like to come off mute and ask as well. But we'll be here for a few more minutes here if anybody has any additional things they want to put in the chat or come off mute.
And really, we just appreciate this time today, your level of involvement, all the great questions that you've been asking. You can submit feedback through mail, postal mail, or through email. The contact information is on the screen there. If you go to the website, it has the mailing address as well. We really want to know, what needs improvement, what the future conditions could be, but also tell us what's working well. We want to keep those assets and those features and recreational opportunities and the natural systems in place that we know that people are using. Please remember to submit your comments by February 23rd as well.
So we have a comment. Thank you so much for this forum and opportunity for an excellent discussion. And then we have another question. Why is the interior of the covered bridge seem always closed?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that one, but we can try to track that one down.
Some more thank you. So here's another question. Do you know if there is a notification of the migratory birds that visit Dexter? I think there are many bird watchers who would value notifications.
Yeah, so there is a group, OBOL, it's the Oregon Birders Online, and that tends to be a good email-based platform where people can post notifications for bird watchers specifically. And then the local Audubon Society recently changed their name, and so their website is also a very good place to go for birding information in this entire region. And so I'll try to find that and put that in the website or in the chat right now as well. I do see a comment in the chat also about a flash. Someone thinks there should be a flashing light at the intersection of Highway 58 and the covered bridge. Thank you for that. That's at Dexter at the Causeway. The Oregon Department of Transportation and the Union Pacific Railroad are both key stakeholders that we'll be coordinating with for this master plan revision. And especially the Department of Transportation often has data on safety and other types of concerns, and we'll work with them on any of their regional transportation planning priorities and future plans that they have. We also can work with the Federal Highway Department on improving access to federal lands as well. So thank you for that comment. That's very helpful.
Here's a question. Would it be possible to limit duck and geese hunting to the upper part of Dexter Lake? Some of these waterfowl are fairly tame, and it is like shooting sitting ducks.
So, Christy, do you want to try that one?
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, so we work really closely with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for any of the hunting and fishing regulations. So the state manages what those regulations are. The Army Corps can provide input for areas where we have safety concerns, where you would have shooting in the proximity to a park or recreation area or near any infrastructure like the BPA transmission lines or right near the dam and some of those areas. I know this comment is specific to Dexter. And so that's definitely something we could talk. There's different sections within the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife that can provide input on those types of things. The master plan, though, will not set the hunting regulations. That's a separate rulemaking process we would do, but we would be a very vocal partner with the state. So any comments you have on that would be appreciated.
As a person who frequently kayaks at Upper Dexter, it is kind of terrifying to be there shooting there. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment as well. We'll put that together with the sitting ducks comment in any kind of discussion we might have with the ODFW.
And I'm putting a note in the chat now. Sorry, the new name for the local Audubon Society, it's the Coast to Cascades Bird Alliance. And I put their website in the chat there. Any information that you have that could be useful to us with the master plan is any rare species that you notice out there, any large flocks of birds, any important nesting areas, whether that's common species or not. Those are the types of things that we would like to know. If there should be an environmental sensitive area designation or a wildlife designation for a certain area to try to improve that habitat. And I see a note in there for otters as well. All right, well, we really appreciate everyone calling in today. We will be doing an in-person meeting in Lowell at the high school from 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturday. It will be very much the same with the same presentation and then maps and a lot of back and forth conversation, trying to get a lot of comments submitted that day. This presentation will be, the recording will be posted online. So please pass the word on to others. So while we're in this initial phase, we can get as much input as possible.